.NET 9 comes with new features such as new LINQ methods, a change to API documentation, and a brand new caching library. Let's take a look at them. We'll start off with the new LINQ methods and specifically the countBy method. We have a customer record up here which takes the forename and the surname. We'll list in the customers. We're going to go through each customer and count the number of times each surname is used. So to do that, we get the customers, we call the countBy, and we're going to be counting by surname. We're going to add each surname and the number of times it's used into a dictionary. So the string is going to be the surname and the integer is going to be the number of times that particular surname is used. So we call surname.count add the key, which is the surname, and the value, which is the count. We're going to test this in a web API controller. So we're going to get a new instance of the LINQ countBy class, and we're going to call the getCount for each surname method. When running that API call, Trump is used twice and Biden is used once. Looking at the customers, Trump is used for 2 customers who have that surname and Biden is used once. We're now going to have a look at the aggregate_by method. This is similar to countBy method, but it focuses on aggregate methods such as sum and average. We have a Premier League records. We pass it in the team, the result, whether they won, lost or drew, and the opposing team. We have all the Premier League results here. We're going to get the number of points for each team. So if a team wins, they get 3 points. If a team draws, they get 1 point. And if they lose, they get 0 points. So we get the Premier League results. We call the new aggregate_by function. We get the key selector, which is going to be the team. We need to set a seed, which is 0. And this is where we can write our aggregate function. So the result, if they win, they get 3 points. If they draw, they get 1 point. Otherwise, they get 0 points. From there, we're going to add each team into a dictionary, with the string being the team and the integer being the number of points. So we get the key and the value and add it to the dictionary. I'm going to test it out in a web API endpoint. We're going to call a new instance of the LINQ aggregate_by class. And we're also going to call the getPoints method. That's outputting Brighton with 9 points, Tottenham with 3 points, and everyone else on 0 points. Looking at the Premier League results, Brighton have a win there. They have a win there and a win there, so that's 9 points. Tottenham have a win there, so they've got 3 points. And everything else is a defeat. The last LINQ method is the index method. This is where it gets the index number of an IEnumerable alongside the item. We have a product record which has the name of it. We're listing some of the products. We're going to test out the new index method. So we get the index and the product from products.index. And like before, we're going to add it into a dictionary with string and integer. So the string will be the product name and the integer will be the index number. So we call product.name and the index number. We've got this in a class of LINQ index. We're going to test it out in our LINQ controller. New instance of the LINQ index, and we're going to call the getIndex for each product. So that's this method here. There's outputting a watch of an index of 0, ring as 1, and necklace of 2. That's in the same order. Minimal APIs have seen a couple of changes around testing improvements and better API documentation. Let's take a look at them. Minimal APIs can use the result static class as part of the response. This returns an iResult type. The alternative is to use typed results. This outputs a strongly typed object. In .NET 9, the typed result static class now includes internal server error, so we're outputting it to this endpoint of server-error. That's outputting our exception. If you use groups in minimal APIs, you can now output to the API documentation whether it's going to throw a problem or a validation problem. To do that, we call the produces_problem method, and we need to specify the status code. So we're going to specify internal server error. There's also produces validation problem. By default, that's going to be a status code of 400, but we can set it explicitly as well. And we'll show you how that looks like later in the video. Coming up, we'll show you a new caching library that has been added to .NET 9. But first, Let's have a look at some developer exception page improvements. To use the developer exception page, you call this in program.cs. Just make sure you do it in the development environment. We're going to test this out with this endpoint. We're going to throw a new exception. This is the developer exception page. If we go into the routing tab, it's added this endpoint metadata, and this contains information about the HTTP calls, the route name calls as well. Keyed services was added in .NET 8, where you can have multiple implementations of the same service in dependency injection, but it wasn't supported in middleware. We set up a couple of keyed services, this one with a singleton lifetime, which we've named singleton. We've also set one up for the scope. We've also added a middleware. If we go into that middleware, we're passing in the instance of the singleton keyed service as part of the constructor, and as part of the invoke method, we're passing in the scoped lifetime. Now the constructor supports the singleton and transient lifetimes, whereas the invoke supports all three of them, the singleton, the scoped, and the transient. Static asset delivery optimization now outputs compressed files when building or publishing your ASP.NET Core application. To turn it on in program.cs, we can substitute the useStaticFiles method with mapStaticAssets. We've published that ASP.NET Core application. If we go into the www root folder, it's outputted these compressed files. So the .br compressed file is Brotli and the .gz is gzip. However, we've spotted a bug with this. Regardless of whether you use the useStaticFiles method or the mapStaticAssets method, it still seems to output the compressed files. Now this presents a problem if you've got a lot of static assets, because it's going to create separate files for each one. The only way we've been able to fix this is to call the static web assets enabled and set it to false in the CSproj file. Now this worked for us, but it can present problems if you're using CSS isolation or Razor class libraries. Now this happened at time of recording using version 9.0.0, and it might have already been fixed by the time you watch this, but it's something to take note of. There's now support for OpenAPI documentation in ASP.NET Core. To configure it, you need to add the Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.OpenAPI package. From there, in program.cs, you call the add OpenAPI in builder.services, and in the app instance, you call map OpenAPI method. This maps your API document to /OpenAPI/v1.json. And it outputs all the documentation. If we go back to the group that we use for minimal APIs, it's now outputting the fact that it could return a 500 or a 400 response. If you wish to change the API endpoint for where the documentation is produced, you can just add a parameter into the map OpenAPI method. HybridCache is the new caching library in .NET 9. It supports in-process and out-of-process caching. To add this, you need to call the Microsoft.extensions.caching.hybrid NuGet package to your ASP.NET Core app. Now, at the time of .NET 9's full release and time of recording, this is still in preview. To add it to your ASP.NET Core app, in builder.services, you need to call the add HybridCache. Now, this throws this exception. We need to suppress that exception. And we do that by calling these lines. From there, it adds the HybridCache to dependency injection, which we can use in, say, our web API controllers. And the way we can use it is we set the instance, then they've got the get or create async method. This is returning something from the HTTP service, and we set our expire times for the cache. If we stick an endpoint on the method and run the application. When we run the endpoint the first time, it goes into it, but if we refresh it, it doesn't do it anymore because it's getting the cached version. There's also support for Redis if you have multiple instances of your ASP.NET Core app. To do that, you need to add the Microsoft.extensions.caching.stack exchange Redis NuGet package to your ASP.NET Core app. In program.cs, you can add this line to configure it, and we've added the Redis connection string to our app settings.json. Now, if you're a Windows user, you can add Redis by using WSL, and I'll leave a link for it in the YouTube video description on how you can do that. So I've got an instance of the ASP.NET Core app. I've just added the cache to Redis. I'm now going to restart the application and run it again. And at this point, it shouldn't call our breakpoint because it's in Redis. And we refresh the page, but it hasn't called our breakpoint because it's got the cache from Redis. These are the key features of .NET 9. But if you're wondering whether you should update, watch this video next. The video talks you through how to update to .NET 9, some of the break-in changes, and whether you should update to .NET 9 or stick with your current .NET version. And let me know in the YouTube comments which feature you like the most.